Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a beer, it's time for some part of Exile discussion. Today I wanted to take a little bit of a look around the web at some of the build ideas that have intrigued me for 3.17 and the upcoming league start that's just a few days away. So these are not going to be full builds, these are going to be 7 foundations that builds can start from. Some of them I will be able to point to someone else's work that they've done on making that build. For other ones, I think you're just going to have to wait until about 48 hours before league start, and at that point you'll start seeing a lot more builds get published, as we have absolute evidence of what the whole passive tree is going to look like, and a whole lot of other information that's essential for build creation. But firstly, 2 important points to make first before you select your league starter. Firstly, determination. The numbers don't lie, use it. Basically, since it was buffed in 3.16, the aura determination is so good that any build that's not using determination is made better by adding determination, just making whatever sacrifices are necessary in order to fit in determination. Determination provides so much defense through both the inherent effects of armor, but also cast when damage taken Molten Shell, that it is just mandatory in my opinion to use it. Additionally, determination scales well with Defiance Banner, and Defiance Banner is really good on its own as well. And then Defiance Banner makes Grace better as well. So most builds should probably at least seriously consider running Determination, Defiance Banner, and Grace, but it won't fault you if you drop Grace from that. Spell Suppression is also really good as well if you're a right side of the tree build, and that's why this video is going to cover mostly right side of the tree builds, because Spell Suppression is just such a strong mechanic very early in the game. However, that's less important than using Determination. So the second point I want to make is about build around unique items. There are a number of items that builds flat out don't function without. A couple of good examples of this are Chevron's Wrappings and Mjolnir. These are items that don't just provide a big luxury boost of power to a build, but they are actually a fundamental interaction that is critical for the build to work at all. If your build is planning on using some of these items, you want to be aware how rare they are, and you want to have a clear plan for how you're going to farm enough currency in order to trade for that item early on. I'm going to put a link in the description below to some information that was compiled by player and redditor Poor Fishwife on the rarity tiers of unique items that were worked out during patch 3.14. I believe these to still almost all be true. There might have been a couple of little changes around the outsides. But if you're planning on making a build that relies upon a specific tier 4 or tier 5 unique, I feel you can go ahead. Tabula Rasa is a good example of a tier 4 unique. It's pretty accessible at league start, even if your build is kind of broken without it. But when you start talking tier 3, these items can be 100 chaos on day 1 if they're in hot demand. And if you're starting to talk about tier 2 or tier 1, these items can be a significant fraction of a Mirror of Kalandra very early on. It is not uncommon on day one of a league for Impulse's Broken Heart to trade 1-for-1 for a Mirror Shard. And that should give you a sense as to just how powerful and how valuable these items are very early in a league. Now, if you can't acquire a Mirror Shard on day 1, and the vast majority of players this is the case, then you should not expect to be in possession of an Impulse's Broken Heart on day 1 of a league. Maybe you can get one on day 5 when it might only be an Exalt, but on day 1 it might be 7 or 8, and that may just be completely beyond your means on day 1. So you should be aware of that, and you should say, okay, I am locked out of Impulse's Broken Heart on day 1, therefore I have to have a different backup plan. Poor Fishwife's resource will really help you in working out whether you're in this situation and what you need, what sort of backup plan you need. If you're looking for a boss-specific unique, then those tend to be something that you'll want to just check up historic prices and then just make a bit of an assessment on whether the meta has shifted towards that boss unique or away. So the first build that I want to recommend is the native trap skill Saboteur. So when I say a native trap skill, I mean a skill that is not reliant upon trap support. So this can be lightning trap, ice trap, lightning spire trap, fire trap, flamethrower trap. Most importantly though, it avoids a lot of the nerfs that took place to trap support. Trap support got made quite a bit worse in 3.17, whilst a lot of other things got made better. And so I think that things like Ice Trap, Lightning Trap with Lightning Spire Trap to help on bosses, Explosive Trap with Flamethrower Trap to assist on bosses are all looking pretty solid. One thing that I need to say very clear, we do not know yet how good the Seismic Trap / Exsanguinate Trap build is going to be in 3.17. This build was absolutely dominant in 3.16 and it was quite dominant in 3.15 as well. Weeks 1 and 2, it was the best build and there was nothing else close to it. Now, this build is being nerfed, and the most important thing about this nerf is that we do not have the numbers on it yet. So the numbers are going to come out when the reworked gem seismic trap is revealed. We don't know how severe this nerf is going to be. It could be crippling. It could be so severe that it outright kills the build. More likely it will be something that will severely reduce its power without outright killing it. And in that case, maybe it's still something that you can play if you really enjoy Seismic Trap. Otherwise, you can play something else. But basically, all Saboteur builds that revolve around traps share one key thing. They are critical strike builds because of the area of the passive tree that the Saboteur starts in. It has all of these amazing critical strike nodes, and this means that you can do some fantastic things with ailments on a Saboteur, and you can also just leave a pile of ruined corpses behind of monsters that didn't even know you were there until all your traps went off. This is also an extremely defensive play style, and this can be amped up by the inherent tankiness provided by Grace, Determination, Defiance Banner, and Spell Suppression. You're not quite in as good a position as a Raider to pick up Spell Suppression, but you can pick up lots of Aura Effect for Grace, Determination, and Defiance Banner, and you can actually have a really tanky character that can just go toe-to-toe with a lot of tanky bosses. Yeah, you still got to get out of the way of slams, but you should be able to survive most things that are not telegraphed, and that's a good spot to be in. Next up, I want to recommend Occultist Poisonous Concoction. This is a build a lot of people have forgotten about. It did really, really well early in 3.16 and carried a lot of players to their first ever kills of the major endgame bosses, including in solo self-found. I did an analysis early in 3.16. I picked one of the Cirrus uniques. I can't remember now whether it was the helmet, Crown of the Inward Eye, or whether it was Thread of Hope, but it was one of those uniques, and I checked what percentage of players that had that item equipped in solo self-found, so i.e. they earned it themselves, what percentage of them were playing Poisonous Concoction Occultist, and it was almost 25%. So you could tell that this build was really carrying a lot of people to serious kills that might otherwise not have gotten there. Not needing a weapon helps a lot with gearing, and Chaos Resistance is surprisingly powerful defensively, and you get a lot of it as an Occultist. The Occultist gets 60% on one of its best damage nodes. It gets 60% Chaos Resistance, and also there's just so much other support on the passive tree for Chaos Resistance now. The Occultist is in a really good place because of this. You can end up being surprisingly tanky. You can also stack one of Evasion and Ghost Shrouds, or Armor and Divine Shield. So you've got lots of potential for power there as well, lots of potential for defensive power. You can be able to endure a lot of hits, but also able to dish out a lot of pain on a low budget. And that's why I suggest Occultist Poisonous Concoction as a very viable league starter. Next is a build that I have seen recommended by Jung Rowan, who is a streamer very well known for being one of the first players in softcore trade-enabled 3.16 to kill a whole bunch of the endgame bosses. 12 hours into the league that he was killing the Phoenix, and it wasn't much longer after that he killed Cirrus at Awakening level 8, and got the first kill of that, I believe, league. So when Jung Rowan recommends a build, there are two reasons for this. The first one is perhaps that he's having a bit of a joke. The second one is that he knows the build is really good. The reason that we know this is the second case is that he's been playing it on stream and he's killed a lot of the top end game bosses with it, has demonstrated this build is very effective, and it's his opinion that most veteran players that were to pick up the Poison Spectral Helix build should be able to, with a little bit of practice, get a sub 5 hour Katava with all skill points and Merciless Lab done. I know that's only veteran players. An inexperienced player might well take 7 or 8 or even 10 hours with the build, but that's fine. You'll get there either way. The build is based around the absolutely broken interactions of Nightblade support and Elusive has X% increased effect on you. This interaction is completely broken and was unexpectedly not nerfed in 3.17, or at least hasn't been yet. So keep an eye on that, but definitely keep an eye on whatever Jung Rowan recommends with this build, because it definitely looks strong. Next up is Champion Archer builds. So Champion's Inspirational grants 30% Aura Effect and free Defiance Banner. Now, what was I saying earlier about Determination being the best aura in the game? Well, the thing that makes Determination so great is that it actually has multiplicative scaling with Aura Effect. Not only does Aura Effect scale the flat armor that Determination gives, it also scales the percentage more armor that Determination gives. And this then provides a further layer of scaling on the flat armor. What this means ultimately is that Champion gets 30% Aura Effect, and that is a stat that quadratically scales your armor score. And that's a big deal. Then you get Defiance Banner for free, which might allow you to reserve an entire additional aura. So this makes your Determination and Grace auras absolutely incredible. And then you've got Fortitude, adding more durability again through a permanent 20 points of Fortify. You can then choose either Master of Metal for an Impale Bow or Conqueror on other builds, such as Toxic Rain. Now, Toxic Rain was all the rage in 3.16. Toxic Rain's being nerfed, but it's still going to be absolutely fine, and I won't fault anyone for playing it. But if you want something a little spicier and different, something that wasn't good in 3.16, then you could try a physical bow archer that uses Impale. The reason I'm suggesting this now as an option is that the base bow types were buffed to the moon in 3.17. This means there'll be a lot more damage on bows, and additionally, it will be less important. You'll be able to function better on a middling to solid bow than you could in 3.16 when you really need an extraordinary bow. Now you can use something that's just very good instead of extraordinary and get the same results. And of course, later on in the league, maybe you'll get that extraordinary bow and do even better. Next up is Skeleton Mages. Now this is build enabled by a unique. You must find Dead Reckoning the Cobalt Jewel, otherwise you cannot play this build at all. This build was really good in 3.16 at killing bosses on dumpster tier gear, but the cat got let out of the bag. More people know about this now, and that means that Dead Reckoning will be more expensive. Fair warning, this build is absolutely reliant upon sourcing this unique jewel. It flat out doesn't work without it, and it is believed to be tier 3 rarity. So if correct, this makes it the same rarity as Cold Iron Point, 4 times rarer than Tabula Rasa, and it has no deterministic farming method. I expect this jewel to be 100 Chaos Days 1 and 2. I expect it to be 50 Chaos Day 3, and I expect it to hold a little bit of value after that. So if you're thinking of playing Skeleton Mages, you need to have a plan. How are you going to farm your first 100 Chaos if you're going to get to maps day 1 or 2? Or if you're not going to get to maps until day 3 or 4, how are you going to farm your first 50 Chaos? As long as you've got that plan, then you should seriously consider this build. Likewise, if you're going to be coming to the league a week late, maybe you've got some long-awaited holiday and you're going to come back on the 10th of February and that's going to be when your league start is, then in that case, Skeleton Mages should be much more accessible because Dead Reckoning, the market will get flooded with them and any trade league player can pick them up. Do you want to play this in solo self-found? I think the answer is probably no unless you know exactly how all of the tips and tricks for farming specific uniques, which basically means grinding heist and using a bunch of borderline exploits involving heist, or just running a whole bunch of heist, a lot of heist. If you run a lot of heist, you will get any unique you want up to tier 2 rarity eventually, but it will take a bit of time, and yeah, it's up to you whether that's worth it or not. Maybe it's not your first character, maybe it's something that you respec into upon sourcing yourself a Dead Reckoning. Occultist Bane is the next thing I want to suggest. Now, Occultist Bane is something I played in Endless Delve. This is a build with strengths and weaknesses. Its strengths, it's got all the durability inherent to the Occultist Ascendancy, plus it is inflicting a lot of curses on enemies. This makes for an inherently defensive playstyle. The drawback, however, is that you just don't do anywhere near as much damage as a lot of other builds. So the damage scaling on this build is quite a bit lower than it is on a lot of others, and so it's fairly solid, and it's the sort of thing that I think is pretty good if you're going up against bosses that don't have massive life pools. It is going to start falling off once you start even getting to the Shaper and Elder tier of bosses, and I'm expecting that the Searing Exarch and the Eater of Worlds will have Nucleus the Maven type level hit points, i.e. something that will take a long time for a Bane Occultist to beat down. However, it is a very safe playstyle. You can potentially fight these bosses slowly and carefully and methodically and get them down anyway. This build also gets a lot of power out of a couple of uniques no one else wants, which is really nice. The Skin of the Lords unique that is that is linked to Chayula is something that can be really good for a Bane Occultist, and a lot of the time you'll want colours on that other people won't want. Additionally, there's relatively easily crafted wands you can use that will grant you +2 to the level of your Chaos spell skills. That'll be a huge boost to your damage. And there's a slightly harder craft you can do for a +2 to Chaos skills amulet that will also grant you a lot of extra damage. Now, this is one of the builds that I would suggest if your goal is to reach level 100 in the league with minimal deaths. It is not a build that I think will do all that well at killing unfamiliar bosses. It'll be good at staying alive against them, but you'll need to prolong the fight. You'll need to be able to stay alive for multiple minutes while you beat the boss down very, very slowly. So if that's a playstyle you're okay with, then Occultist Bane is something to consider. Otherwise, maybe give this one a miss. Next is something that is a lot more up in the air whether it's good or not. And this is the Deadeye Rupture. So Deadeye has a node that most players never even realized was added, Rupturing. Critical strikes which inflict bleeding also inflict Rupture. Ruptured targets take 25% more damage from bleeding, and bleeding on them expires 25% more quickly, lasting for 3 seconds. Up to 3 ruptures can affect a target. So this is a lot more bleed damage. 75% more bleed damage is 1.5 support gems worth of extra damage. This is a big deal. Less duration is slightly less optimal, but it is at a manageable level. This is not some absolutely crippling decrease in duration, but it is serious. So you're going to need to hit the monster more frequently in order to make a rupturing build work, but you're going to be able to do it. Plus, like, you're playing a Deadeye. Deadeyes have amazing damage projection. They can fire projectiles and chains everywhere. This is a good spot to be in. Anyway, those are 7 ideas that I had as potential league starters for 3.17. I think that there's a variety of different builds all on the right-hand side of the tree for you there. I may give a little bit more thought to left-hand side of the tree builds and come up with something on that side to recommend in the future. But for the moment, these are some of the things I'm thinking of. What am I thinking of starting myself? My first possibility is that I will stick with lightning traps. I've been testing this and have been pretty content with the performance so far. Second option is giving Jung Rowan's build a go. I am giving that serious thought, and I might actually play through the axe and maybe even early mapping with that this week to see how it feels. Otherwise, though, who knows? Maybe I'll make a decision at the last second as well. That certainly won't be the first time that I've done that. That's all I've got. May your Valops have interesting results, and I will see you around.